Dinuk Wijeratne is one of Canada's most sought-after classical artists. Composer, pianist, conductor, he's been described as exuberantly creative by the New York Times, with plenty of awards and other accolades for his boundary-crossing works. In town to perform with the Manitoba Chamber Orchestra in their second concert of the season, titled A Modern Polymath, Dinuk has joined me in the Classic 107 studio. Good morning.
Good morning, Simon.
A pleasure to have you here. A modern polymath. How does that sound to you?
It sounds. I don't know. I'm surprised, but I'll take it.
Yeah. Why not, right? Well, I mean, in terms of these kind of polymathic leanings, there most certainly is a lot of musical influences in your writing, and I can't help but begin by asking a little bit about them. So if you'd let me run through the bio very, very quickly, I'll get to the question. You were born in Sri Lanka, you studied in Dubai before compositional studies at the Royal Northern College of Music in the UK, and then the invite to Juilliard, which again we'll get to in just a bit, doctoral studies in Toronto, most certainly an East meets West CV. Though I'm curious, your earliest musical memories, are they East, are they West, are they a bit of both?
A bit of both, I think.
Yeah.
I don't think I can really remember, but actually before I started studying piano at the age of 9, I studied a South Indian classical instrument called the mridangam, and I didn't sort of, I don't know, I didn't take to it for a long period of time. I switched to the piano, but the sounds of it are still in my ear, and I was listening to music from everywhere at the same time.
And I was watching a past interview of yours, and you spoke of music's power to balance extremes and explore dualities, is the word that you used?
Very much.
Is that something you realized at that young age, that you could explore all of these different dualities, changing from that instrument to the piano, a very Western instrument?
That's a great question. I don't think one does as a child, because I think you're doing everything intuitively.
Yeah.
But I think when you reflect on it, probably when you go to college and you spend some time by yourself and you start to intellectualize all the things you've been learning intuitively, I did, then I realized, wow, like I'm using my art to try and reconcile my identities. And, that's one of the great things that you can do with art.
Yeah, you can explore multiple identities or perhaps even no identity at the same time, right?
Absolutely. And I think that's why it's essential for young people to do, and just everyone, because you can find, there are so many definitions of what music is, but one of my favorite ones is that it allows you to balance things that you can't. It allows you to find a balance that would probably elude you in daily life. You can balance things that you can't really balance otherwise.
Yeah, it's so true. I mean, there's so much going on in music, and that is perhaps the understatement of the day. But in your career, you've explored those dualities in all of your writing and all of your playing, and mined them for all sorts of treasures and nuggets. Can we talk a little bit more about that CV that I ran through oh so quickly? I'm especially curious about the invite from John Corigliano to study at Juilliard. How does one get an invite from John Corigliano?
It was actually a dream come true. I had heard his music. I'd heard his clarinet concerto, which I think is his finest piece, and I just thought, wow, this is amazing. I didn't know who he was. I didn't, I barely knew where New York was. And then I forgot about it. And I think I was at a point in life where I would normally sort of take a couple of years out. I just got my undergrad, and I wasn't quite sure. I played. I enjoyed improvising at the piano, and I thought, well, maybe I'll go and study some jazz or something at Berkeley or something. And then serendipitously, he was in Manchester to receive an honorary degree. And I met him at my graduation, and he said, "Do you have a score?" And so I gave him a score. I had no plans, and the next thing I know, the invitation came.
That is totally wild.
Yeah, and I ended up going to New York for a week to do the audition. But also, I remember pestering him for a consultation lesson, because I just thought, well, if I'm going to come, I need to know if it's kind of like a collaboration, really.
It totally
I think
is.
At that level, you really need to vibe with your teacher. And I knew he gave me a lesson for an hour, and I just thought, this is it. This is totally what I want to do.
So what's it like studying with a living legend?
He is all about concept. He's all about clarity, and he gets you to be very, very clear about what you want. And this made such a tremendous impact on me. It's affected every aspect of my life. It goes beyond just composing the pieces. It becomes about how you manage your career, how you think about your goals. And I just owe him so much. I actually spoke to him just a couple of weeks ago.
No
I
way.
still go and see him whenever I'm in New York. And I dropped him a note and I said, hey, we're on the same program,
That is pretty cool.
Yeah.
It really, really is. Speaking of people you have to vibe with,
Mm-hmm.
from there you went on to do your doctoral studies at the University of Toronto. And I mean, John Corigliano has a wide array of influences, but Christos Hatsis has an eclectic take on music, very much like your own,
Absolutely.
I think. What was it like working with him, going from Corigliano to Hatsis in those doctoral studies?
Well, this is the thing. I've been so blessed to have such amazing mentors, and Christos is not only a mentor, but he's a dear friend. And it was fantastic because he was the only person. I did my doctorate late in my career, mid-career.
Mm-hmm.
So I said to the university, if I come and do this, then I don't want to interrupt the flow of my work. And they said, fine. They were just very accommodating. And I think I said, I would come for Christos,
Yeah.
And it really cemented our friendship. And he's just such a wonderful human being, as well as a great artist. It was amazing to work with him.
I've heard that echoed by so many people. A friend of mine did his undergrad and went and did his master's with Christos Hatsis at U of T, and just said the exact same thing. Just a great human being, right? That same idea. You talk about kind of you're in the midst of a career. You're right in the thick of things when you go and do your doctoral studies, and it was while you were there you get the Juno nod. Very, very exciting. I know this is a while back in 2016, but Classical Composition of the Year, 2 pop songs on antique poems. Looking back now to that time, what does that Juno Award mean to you?
It means a lot. I mean, it was amazing to get it for that project. I totally didn't expect to get it. And Simon, I mean that sincerely because I was sitting there having a good time, eating my meal. My wife was there. And then I just totally thought it was going to someone else. A couple of other people, actually. And then she said, when they announced it, she said, that's the whitest I've ever seen you.
True shock. Let's put it that way. And now, is it something that lives on your mantle? Do you think about it? Does it inspire you in a way now?
I wouldn't say I think about it, but it lives on. It's a beautiful. It's a beautiful. Structure, it's a beautiful thing to look at. It's sort of, it's close by. So if I turn around in my studio, it's right there.
Oh, fantastic!
And that has some inspirational value for sure.
Oh, no doubt. And it is such a cool collaboration. The song, the Classical Composition of the Year, 2 pop songs on antique poems, is found on the album Spin Cycle, which features the Afiara Quartet. Afiara Quartet, along with Scratch Bastard, whose work is stunning.
Yes.
Who thinks to bring together a DJ and a string quartet?
I should clarify, I won the Juno for the 2 acoustic pieces.
Right, yes, and then he remixes them after as a sort of sample,
yes,
right?
But it was, I believe, Christos and the quartet who came up with that project,
Cool.
that idea.
Yeah.
To create acoustic pieces, then remix them, and then in a sense remix the remix.
Yeah.
It was a wonderful project, and again, these projects become about the humans who undertake them. And the Afiara Quartet are just people who just love, they walk into a room expecting great things to happen. They're just so alive to possibility, and it was really a wonderfully infectious energy.
Yeah, and the whole project, if people haven't listened to Spin Cycle, it is fascinating. I have loved Scratch Bastard's work for a very long time, like going back to Chaos, and his work with Shad on Flying Colors is another great album. I know you've worked with Buck 65, another person that Scratch Bastard has worked with, and this idea of sampling in your music. I mean, I mentioned that Scratch Bastard remixed these works of yours, and you yourself also used a little sample in the songs. Did you not? A little bit of Schubert was used as a hook?
Yes, exactly. And it was the notion of thinking of, I think because I was doing a project with Scratch in 2012.
Yeah.
And we used a loop from Death and the Maiden just because I told him, I said, you've got to hear this quartet. It's one of the most amazing things in classical music. And I remember his perspective being, this sounds like a loop to me.
Yeah.
He just heard the first 2 bars. And it was just that sort of mindset of hearing certain things in a non-loop genre as loops. We had fun with that.
Yeah, and one of the things that really struck me was just this idea of I mean, he thinks of it in terms of loops, but we think of it in terms of perhaps themes, like Beethoven and an earworm. The guy, he basically had loops. He kept bringing back this same theme in different guises, in different ways, but it was a similar sort of idea. And I think what is very exciting about your music and your approach is this sort of adventurousness and the way with which you approach music that makes it relatable to so many different audiences. You don't necessarily have to be a classical music fan. You could be big into scratch hip-hop scene and be right there vibing, grooving along at the same time. So I think that's really cool.
Thank you.
So you're in town to continue this adventurous collaboration of yours, to perform with the Manitoba Chamber Orchestra as a true classical triple threat, the fabled composer-pianist-conductor combo. Before we get to the program itself, can you talk about that combo? What's it like balancing those three aspects of yourself in a concert?
The challenge is trying to balance them. And it's funny you should ask, Simon, because, when I came to Canada, I was conducting almost entirely. I won an assistantship with the Nova Scotia Symphony. Yeah. And that was just right out of school. And for a while, I put all of my, creating my own content on the back burner. And then I missed it so much, I realized, okay, this is what I want to do. So I'd say I think of myself as a composer/creator first. I'm someone who's, I feel I have the privilege to create my own content, and it seems there's a market for it. So great. But I'm glad I had that time to acquire the skills of conducting, because I just love that, just that act of collaborating with people. There's nothing like being on the podium watching people play. I always say it's the best seat in the house. It really is quite wondrous. And then I was always into improvising at the piano. Not from my teens. I probably started when I was in Manchester, probably about 19 or 20. I very much wanted to get off copy, And trying to keep these things all going is a little strange. I devote most of my time to composition, but there's no way I could stop performing, because it kind of completes that circle. So it's really amazing to have this opportunity to do all. It's probably the one of the few times where it's really happened where the whole program is just me trying to balance all three things.
I'm curious, what got you off copy? Regular listeners will know this. I bring this up regularly in conversations, that I feel like the one thing that's missing, especially at the undergraduate level when you're doing a music degree, let's say, in my experience, the one thing that's really missing is improvisation, which would have been standard fare back in the day of Mozart and Beethoven and Bach and everything else.
Of course.
What got that kind of idea of heading off copy into your mind? Was it just like, I just want to explore something new, or what was that?
No, I think it was probably the composer's brain, right? Because the way I see it is composition and improvisation are opposite sides of the same coin. It just means that, with composition, you have there's some premeditated activity, and with improvisation, it's the spontaneous act of composing. Excuse me. And I think for all undergrads, I think, it would be, I always say for undergrads, it's great if, let's say you're an instrumentalist and you're there for 4 years, do dabble in some improvisation, some composition.
Yeah.
And some conducting if you can, because they really allow you to exercise different facets of being a musician.
Yeah, it just really rounds you out in terms of your approach. So I guess perhaps the best example of this on the program is your own concerto that was part of the concerto project by the MCO. What can you tell us about this work?
Well, I'm very excited to present it. The funny thing is, it does come across like a concerto because it's virtuosic for the piano and strings. I wouldn't call it a concerto. What I'm calling it is fantasy variations on a traditional theme.
Nice.
And the traditional theme is a Sri Lankan theme. It's called Gajaga Vannama. Gajaga is elephant. And Vannama is a dance form that goes back hundreds of years. Huh. And I did a lot of research. I even worked with some friends of mine who are ethnomusicologists, because I have actually spent more time with Indian classical sources than I have with Sri Lankan classical sources. So I've had a lot of fun trying to capture my own version of something that has been in my ear since I was a child, right? But this is the first time I've put it down. It's a theme that probably every Sri Lankan would recognize. But you probably know in Sri Lanka there are two ethnic groups. I happen to be a product of both. I'm both Sinhala and Tamil. And if you go back far enough with the Gajagawa Varnama, it is a hybrid of both Sinhala and Tamil influences. So I think in the future I'd like to sort of extend the piece, maybe add another movement, but I'm very excited to present this. It's a 15-minute beast. So I'm really excited.
It's the elephant in the room there.
It is.
Yeah,
it
yeah,
is.
Yeah. Well, we keep coming back to this idea of dualities in your music, in your own performing career, in your writing career. I was reading another interview where you talk about how you create your music, and melodically in this interview, and perhaps this is the case indeed in this work, but melodically mainly modal in the listening, kind of a sort of Western classical influence, but in the rhythms that you choose, that is where we really meet the West. You mentioned Indian music, working with the tabla, and that way. Is that a fair summation of your music, kind of this East meets West duality of
I would
rhythm
say,
and melody?
and I would say particularly, so I mean, I grew up in the Middle East, so there are a lot of Middle Eastern influences, because I was the music was going in the ear, even though I wasn't studying it formally as I was Western classical music. But in terms of the dominant rhythmic language, I've been obsessed with tabla my whole life. I always joke that maybe I played the tabla in a previous life or something. I have no idea. And even though I can't make a sound on the instrument, exploring drumming of South Asian cultures has been just a wonderful journey, you know, and now it just comes out. Even in two pop songs on Antique Poems, it's not trying to make any explicit statement on drumming traditions, but there is tabla material in there.
It's
there. For sure.
It's there, and it's unavoidable. It's just part of your being.
Yeah.
So in addition to your own music, there's an eclectic collection of composers on the rest of the program. There's music of Bartók, there's music of Mozart, there's some Grieg, and of course there's Corleano.
Yeah.
How do all those work together?
Well, actually, the MCO was so kind to say, we'd like you to curate the rest of the program and just give us a sense of what you'd like to do. And I think they posed the idea, well, why don't you make it about the composers who inspire you? And when I was 12 years old, I always say I had my first spiritual experience before it was anything religious, was hearing a piece of Mozart. And I remember that was it. That was the moment where I thought, well, whatever this is, I want to get closer to it. And that was a journey into music. So Mozart had to be on there. Bartók was, I would say, with me throughout my grad years in New York, because I would, every bit of spare time I had, I'd go into the Juilliard Library and then just read everything about how Bartók had studied music that went beyond the classical tradition, because as soon as I realized that he was integrating things that was from different cultures, I thought, oh, well, I want to know how to do that.
Yeah, one of the great ethnomusicologists out there.
Absolutely, and he was a master at this. It's just
and pioneered the form. Yeah,
absolutely, and so thoroughly assimilated. And then, of course, the Corleano, I wanted to share, be able to share the program with my teacher. And the Grieg, I have to say, not a strong personal influence, but it's just a perfect piece. And
great.
And don't you hate him for that?
Yeah, it's great.
Yeah.
That rigodon, the conclusion is
the piece is just note perfect.
Yeah, it really is. And there's nothing wrong with it. I mean, I don't know, to me, it's just one of those that there's Peer Gynt, and we all know him for Peer Gynt, but this Holberg suite.
Oh, I think it's a stronger piece.
It's fantastic.
Yeah.
It really is, front to back.
Yeah.
It is just a great piece of music, and one that I came to know here at Classic 107. Dinuk, thank you so much for coming into the studio today. It was a real pleasure to have you.
Thank you, Simon. It's been a pleasure.
Hopefully we'll have you back soon.
I hope so. Thank you.
Dinuk Wijeratne performs as part of the Manitoba Chamber Orchestra concert tonight, Wednesday, 7:30 p.m., October 30th, Westminster United Church. The concert is at, again, 7:30 p.m. And for more information on Dinuk Wijeratne, a modern polymath, visit the MCO.ca or classic107.com.